In a new age of watchmen, a team of individuals, pooling their talents and abilities, come together to bring analysis, reaction, and comedy to the fold. This is their chronicle. This is Accounting Arc.
Lead us in, Liz.
Hello, and welcome back to ARC, where we talk about all sorts of fun accounting topics. And today we have an even more fun one because I am positing the argument that AI will take our jobs, and it's supposed to. And this is great, and I'm excited about it.
How dare you suggest such blasphemy?
It is blasphemy, but you know what? I'm okay with that. So my argument foundationally, and we can discuss all and dissect the pieces of this, but we as professionals with the first level of technology that came in and information systems, and why the first information systems were all centered around accounting data is because we have a ton of data, right? And when that happened, we now had ways to be more efficient in our jobs, but we lost what we used to have at professional firms, which is true paraprofessionals assisting the professionals in their jobs, and then also administrative support. So this first wave of technology kind of made firms and companies believe they didn't really need as much support underneath because the technology existed. And then, unfortunately, that turned a lot of accountants into data entry clerks, which is not where anyone wants to start their career. And now we are here today, and everybody's saying AI is going to take our jobs. But I'm like, AI is going to take our jobs. Yes, absolutely. But it should, because we shouldn't have been doing that in the first place. What do you guys think?
I was pausing to wait to see Donny's reaction. But I think it's a really interesting take, right? A lot of us, I mean, even, I've been in the industry since Y2K, so over 2 decades. And that's really been, frankly, I would argue the big launch of technology. I was there when we bought laptops at the firm that I was working at, right? Like we got our first laptops. And, before that, I honestly, when I was studying accounting, data entry wasn't even what I even thought about with respect to accounting. It has been this evolution because of the technology growth. And, so it's really interesting to think about AI now plugging that role in accounting of data entry, and now the evolution of getting back to the analysis and, everything else that goes around translating information, which we've talked about on prior episodes. So I love the perspective. I wish there wasn't a lot of people out there who maybe right now sit in a chair that's primarily data entry and are creating, a lot of anxiety for them. But, this could be a great opportunity for the profession.
I definitely agree. And Byron, you mentioned back to Y2K, and I think that's making me feel old because now I'm like, I have 2.5 decades in this profession. And back then, though, we were actually still doing manual ledgers to a point. I mean, there was Quicken. I think QuickBooks had just started coming out, or was in a very early version of it. And so a lot of it was manual. And the big change as I reflect on that is really the volume of transactions, because we were able to automate the transactions. Instead of, for example, accumulating purchases over a month and then sending the invoice once a month, we invoice every time someone buys something from us in exchange. So the whole volume of data, which got translated back into paper, I'm going to send you an invoice, mail you an invoice, changed, and we did an update. So it's kind of interesting. And actually, I completely agree with Liz. that was not the reason. Doing data entry was not the reason I joined the profession. It was to do the analytics and to help make everyone make these better decisions. It was just the accounting, and I'm drawing on the ledgers, is what we had to do to be able to get to that point of the data. And now, hey, let's get back to where the technology is doing it for us.
Yeah. So I think the interesting thing is when I'm talking to people that are coming out of school and have decided to be in accounting, they're all excited about like forensic accounting, and they're all excited about these like buzzword topics that we all know is just part of doing what we do, right? But the reason is because unfortunately they end up most of the time graduating with an accounting degree in a role where they are doing a lot of, if they're not going to an audit firm, which is a whole other level of manual data, they're doing a lot of data entry and accounting, transaction coding at the base level, because the systems can't support that automation yet. And we as a profession have removed a big layer of what I call paraprofessionals. And I am going to preface that because I do believe that we do have some people in those roles currently, but not to the extent they were like when my grandfather was a CPA.
I definitely agree. And I think we need people in those roles. That's one of the things that I want to help increase in our profession is really what I think of as the inclusion, because we've created sort of this elitist profession, and it's really centered around the CPA. And what I think we're seeing right now is the need for more diversity in the profession. And I'm using that from a level of expertise, level of knowledge, as well as the roles, because we don't need CPAs to do everything. And in fact, as we start to look at the different disciplines, management, accounting, or finance, compared to audit, compared to tax, there are different types of professionals, including paraprofessionals, that can operate in each of these areas and add a lot of value to the entire accounting function.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I think it's been challenging over time, because I think probably what we are referring to as a paraprofessional role is probably maybe different than some people think about when they think about paraprofessional, because there's been, I think, this trend in the last maybe 10 plus years to kind of tag everybody in an accounting firm that's not a CPA as paraprofessional. And that's everybody from administrative staff to non-licensed staff. And I think it's created a lot of ambiguity in what that paraprofessional means. So when we talk about paraprofessional, we are talking about accountants. These are people who understand accounting and are contributing to the cycle of accounting, which is every bit as critical of, somebody who is performing the audit, completing a tax return, doing the analysis. So I think we need to get back to really recognizing the different seats and the roles that they play in the accounting cycle to kind of give true value to where it belongs and deserves to be.
Well, and to put into perspective, like you have paralegals, which is a very respected profession. That is a paraprofessional. Like same thing, right? So it's people who have studied, like most of the time they have degrees in paralegal studies before they even go into the testing to get to be a paralegal. And then they have to be working under a lawyer for a while. In most states anyways, right? And so it's like the same thing, but on the accounting side, right? So we have people who might be considered bookkeepers, and they're happy to be called bookkeepers today, that aren't CPAs, that are preparing reports for CPAs to make decisions and like strategic advice on. And some of them are very good at strategic advice as well, because they have the experience and they've been doing it for a very long time. They might just not have the education to get the credential that we have to be able to do what we do, right? And so it's like breaking down the system, like the I don't even know what to call it, but it's like understanding the process to be what you are, what you want to be, the system around it, what matters to you, and then understanding it in a way that you can not be judgmental and also not have like weird associations with different words, because that's a very respectable professional decision to be, to work under a CPA. Like, why would that ever be an issue? That's what I'm trying to understand.
But what you just said too also makes me think of the up or out mentality that we often see in so many firms. And that's part of the cause of the
Right.
high turnover. It's also, I think, very disruptive to the whole work process, as Byron was bringing up, that if you always have to retrain someone, always retrain them, like that's in itself causes a lot of issues. So if we're really trying to be efficient, what we really would do is have solid people doing some of the work. I'm going to draw it as a pyramid, right? Doing the work
Yeah.
at the lower end of the pyramid, but we cannot do the work without them doing it. If we start to shift that pyramid, it's not going to be solid anymore. What we are seeing, going back to Liz's point, is that more of the bottom part of the pyramid is able to be automated. AI taking on a lot of that. But even then, AI needs to be supervised. When I talked about AI to people, I was to treat it as a first year staff. Like, it's new, it's learning. Let it do some stuff, but you always got to review what it's doing. You got to make sure it's still coming out to what you're expecting it to come out with. And you wouldn't trust a first year staff judgment. Like, you got to relook at it and go, hey, does this make sense to me?
I would say a first year staff where English is not their first language.
Interesting.
Well, because the other side of it is, I mean, the generative AI that exists today is still learning proper syntax, even.
Sure.
And so it might be able to mimic what it thinks a sentence should sound like, but it is not actually constructing a sentence from the understanding of the language that we have innately. And so when you're like looking at outputs from a lot of AI, like sometimes it has run-on sentences or sentences that are not sentences or words that don't mean what they think it means, but looks good in the sentence that it's attempting to write. And so I would say, yes, AI is a first-year staff with a whole lot of basic knowledge, book knowledge, no street smarts, and very clearly is just learning this language.
Well, and as you were talking about that, it made me kind of revisit what you opened with about, AI replacing some of the things that we are doing as accountants, and, allowing us to now actually focus on being accountants. And, then we talked about paraprofessionals, and I think one of the roles that we're going to begin to see in that paraprofessional role is the supervisor of the tools, right? It's
100%.
it's the person who can, pull the levers, verify the output is accurate before it is then released, let's say, to the accountants. It's still that supervisor role, but it's a different skill set than a number punching skill set.
Oh, absolutely. And quite frankly, it's more entertaining.
For some of us.
Well, I mean, like if you make a mistake, right? If you're sitting at a computer and you're doing a ton of transactional data entry, if you make a mistake, it's going to be like a transposition mistake, right? Where it's going to be a pain in the butt to find. You'll have to divide by 9 and eventually be like, oh, God damn it, I messed up. Like, let me find that and go line by line, right? Or it's going to be like an order of magnitude issue, right? Where you put a 0, but the mistakes that AI is going to make at the beginning are not going to be either of those. Like, it's not going to be an order of magnitude issue. It's not going to be a typo. It's not going to be, transposition. It's going to be weird. And so, like, way more entertaining because it'll be both easier to find because you can query and ask exactly what happened, and it can search an entire database for an issue, right? And also, it'll just be entertaining because it'll be interesting to learn how this machine is learning versus, just finding your own errors, which is boring and frustrating and not great, in my opinion.
Well,
think that's
I
fair.
will say that it kind of points towards the hallucinations. And yes, some of those hallucinations that AI comes up with are definitely creative and entertaining.
Yeah, it is very interesting. As a segue, I have been using a lot of generative AI and pushing the limits of what I think it can and can't do. But the image generators are very fun when you try to have them overlap with words. So if you get an image generator to put any kind of words in there, it makes it visually pleasing, but they are not words.
They're not the words you requested anyway.
And some of the letters are not
maddening at
characters
times.
in any
Yeah.
language, actually. So it becomes very interesting to see the like broadened use of it. But if we pull that back to where we are today, we are at the brink of having generative AI that can actually do data entry and coding for us in a meaningful way and overlay on top of the systems that we're already using versus replacing them.
Without a doubt. I think, I mean, it's an exciting time. I wish I was really early in my career, like looking at all the opportunity as AI and technology is colliding with, you know, what has been historically the accounting profession. I mean, there's some pretty neat opportunities at, you know, all spots along the spectrum of what is that accounting cycle. So, you know, even if you're maybe not necessarily sure if the CPA path is the path you're looking at, like we've already discussed probably a dozen or more opportunities to, you know, be a member of the accounting profession, doing things in a technology and accounting kind of facet where you're contributing to accounting, but not necessarily going after that CPA, which is completely okay. But it really creates just such a wide net of opportunity for people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think AI overseer is a likely job description soon. Although I don't know that any other company besides mine would call it the overseer of AI.
Lord of AI.
Master of the
Whose
bots.
name is all about watching AI, right? Or keeping AI.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's great. Yeah.
But either way, I do think that that's where, you know, paraprofessionals in the future will be focused is managing the systems and processes and ensuring that things are coming out the other side that are usable from a strategic perspective and from a reporting perspective. And I think it will elevate everybody in the profession as well. And I think that right now, you know, our profession, especially at the price point we're stuck at in the US at the moment, most of our teams are supported by outsourced and offshore support. And that is only rising with the global economy. And, you know, while it was a cheaper option to get incredibly qualified and talented humans on your team, the cost of living globally is going up and it's leveling itself because we're going to end up in a global economy here shortly. And most of those people can go get a direct contract remote job at this point, and they don't really have to disclose where they are in a lot of cases. And so they're able to get higher salaries if they're really good. So all of that will be going away. So the pressure from an economic perspective will be to replace that as well. And, you know, either that or people are going to have to actually pay accountants what we're worth.
Well, that's back into the original point you made, I think, which is because we're doing all of these more mundane tasks like data entry, to me, technically, we are getting paid what we're doing. Maybe not what we're worth, but we're getting paid for what we're doing. So
Right.
if we can get rid of all of this lower level stuff and pass it over to the bots or AI and other tech, then maybe we can actually get paid what we're actually worth, because then we're going to be operating at that higher level.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
fast track. Like, I think we can fast track people's careers to that as well. Like, if that's what you want to do, right? Like, if you want to be a clerk that does a lot of data entry and bot stuff, like, awesome, do that. But if you want to be a strategic advisor, like you want to focus on what CPAs were at the beginning of this profession, then we can fast track the time to get there. That hasn't happened in the last like 50 years, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, I think it also requires people to embrace it, right? There's a lot of tension right now around this idea that, like, how dare somebody suggest they use TurboTax rather than me? How dare somebody suggest they use QuickBooks rather than me? And kind of to exactly what you're saying, if your best value is I put information into QuickBooks successfully, then your your value is the $119 a month that you pay for a QuickBooks subscription. And that is where it's at. So you have to embrace the fact that these tools are becoming available at the consumer level. And that means that we do need to elevate ourselves so that we can't be replaced by those tools. If you are competing against a tool, then it's time to really reflect on, like, what value do I bring to this conversation?
Then you are a tool. Sorry, I couldn't resist.
You were laughing before you even said it.
I'm here for the comedy, guys. Predictable and consistent.
Heat it up for you.
One that's I think also back on the paraprofessional part, right? So let's have paraprofessionals that perhaps deal with the less complex situations, and then that way, then we're pushing work towards everyone that's in the right role and also what they enjoy. Because that's the other thing. I've seen some people that maybe they don't love the data entry, but that balancing to the penny and seeing that, they're so detailed oriented, and that's not me. Oh. I'm like, it doesn't balance. Somebody go figure out why it doesn't balance and then give it back to me. But I don't want to go dig through all that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and I think, it takes everyone on a team to like be successful, right? And there's places for everyone inside of our profession. And so I agree with we have become a little bit elitist in what CPA is. And I think we've become a little, as a profession, probably because of that up or out mentality, pushed people into positions they probably shouldn't be in. And creating a profitable firm with really good team members, where everybody kind of chooses their own adventure, has been something I've been working on for 10 years, and it's really, really hard, even if people like know what they want, which for the most part they don't, to be fair. So it's really hard to build something in this profession with that mentality, but I think AI is going to make it easier, because we will have the support and we'll have more real-time information. So instead of people spending so much time doing manual processes they're not interested in, to figure out what they are interested in, they'll get there faster.
Yep, no doubt. The one thing, and I meant to bring this up when Donny first kind of talked about that up or out philosophy that we see in a lot of organizations. It's not just firms, but a lot of organizations. It's such a just terrible approach to managing talent, right? Because I've always had the perspective. I remember when I ran an IT company, I was like, if this individual loves being tier 1 help desk and they are a rock star at it, I will pay them handsomely to stay at that level. They never have to manage a person. They never have to be a leader of any sort. They just need to show up and do and be a rock star at that level. And unfortunately, those types of people in organizations, they end up getting put in a position where they end up failing, and they're miserable and they're unhappy. And it's such a just unfortunate situation for a lot of really talented people. And it also, on the flip side, creates this expectation that, well, I've been in your organization, Liz, for 2 years. I should be a supervisor just because I went around the sun twice and I showed up for work. So it's like, it also creates this expectation that I'm failing if I'm not advancing through the organization. But that doesn't happen just because you exist. Like, you, one, have to want to, and two, have to show you have the aptitude to do it. But I think it's really just, it creates this tension for everybody where if you're really good at a role, you can be in that role to the end of time. And organizations should be perfectly comfortable with that. And if you want to grow and excel, then organizations should be willing to dedicate the resources for that.
I'm gonna put a little bit of a spin on that thought, which is yes, absolutely. People should be able to stay in one role and be supported in that. And also, we live in an economy with constant inflation, and we live in an economy with like the constant need to make more. And most of the people sitting in a specific role need to make more because they're living paycheck to paycheck.
Yep.
So there has to be some way to accommodate that. And right now in our economic system, there is not. So it's not just in accounting where you have the upper out mentality. It's across the board. And a lot of it is pushed because people need raises and significant raises, not inflation matching raises, because they're getting further and further behind from a debt perspective than ever before in the history of our country.
That's where I might disagree with you. I agree with you on the situation that's occurring. The solution, I might disagree with you a little bit in there, because if they're getting into debt for whatever reason, that's to me more of a financial, I'm going to call it financial wellness discussion. What decisions are we making? Are we living within our means? Because we're seeing a lot of that stuff come up.
So you're taking a global issue and breaking it down, right? So I'm talking macroeconomically. We are seeing across the board, people are getting into more debt. They are not able to live like the same lifestyle that they would have 30 years ago. There's all of these macroeconomic issues that we're dealing with. And when you have individuals that are struggling with that, they can't sit in the same position, even if they're really good at it and even if they really want to, because they need more money. So I'm not saying that there's not, like, there has to be individual accountability at some point, but from like a macroeconomic perspective, like we're sitting in a really bad time for individuals.
Definitely agree with that. That's probably a just good discussion for us for another episode, because there's a bunch of levers there, right? That
absolutely.
That are occurring. Where was I going to go? There was something that Byron said. So the whole concept of the individual and them being able to contribute, it was growth. So I was looking, just because they're staying in the same position also doesn't mean that they're growing. So we've had someone that was in what is not necessarily an entry level position. It's maybe a senior, so one step above. We've had someone that's been in that position for, is it like 15 years now? I think she's been with me. And the growth that we've seen in her is different. So even though she's still that direct, so she's the direct person dealing with our clients, the growth that we've seen in her is as technology has changed, she's had to learn the new technologies. We've also seen in her an increase in the understanding of the whole picture that we're working with. So she now can understand, oh, client mentioned this. Wait, hold on, client. Let me get you in touch with Donny, because that's a discussion you need to have with him. Or, hey, you know what? The client mentioned this. Should we talk to them some more about that? And she'll come inside and to the rest of us, and we'll kind of even just feed. Now we can just feed her back information. Well, ask about this and ask about that, because now she understands the context and she can do all this upfront information gathering. Sure. And the other thing, though, that I think is even more important is the clients love her. Yep. She's developed such a rapport. We haven't had to change it out. So she's been working with them for so long. The level of trust that they have with her. In fact, we just had a client say, hey, we really love working with her. Can we send her something? And I was like, we're all virtual. I'm going to have to ask permission to give you her home address if you really want to do that. Luckily, I was actually coming home to Hawaii, so I said, hey, send it to my house and I'll personally deliver it to her. But that whole ability to build rapport, that's something that I think we often discount, and we think, oh, that's the partner level or that's the senior manager level. But it really should be done at all levels.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's funny you mentioned that. I was just having a conversation last week about, again, back to a help desk role in my IT department. I had a woman who worked for me for many years who, when it comes to like technical troubleshooting, I would say she's above average, not expert level. But when it comes to having rapport, having care, following up with people, like all of the interpersonal aspects of being a help desk technician through the roof. And, I would take, those interpersonal skills over the technical skills any day of the week because, that ability to fix something and then to be a jerk in the process is not great. But somebody who might not be as quick to get to resolution, but it's a really good experience with them, I like knock out. And I think that's overlooked in a lot of roles.
Yeah, I agree. And I think Donnie, your case is specifically somebody finding ways to produce more value in their current role, right? And I think that there's a huge argument that everyone can do that across the board, and that might, help with getting raises to accommodate, because if you can provide more value to the organization, then you can demand more value for what you're doing, even if it's technically in the same role, right? Which I think is a wonderful thing to have people that want to do that, right? And creating that inside of our profession is important. And I think, to full circle this back to the AI, as we have more tools supporting us in our profession, there will be more opportunities for every level and every individual on a team to find what is that tool, because we're at, the spark point, right? So whenever we have a spark point with big technology, there's a bunch of startups that come out of it. And you never know which one's going to win, right? Or which ones to test, or which ones to play with, or what works best, or how it works best. And so that gives this whole next 10 years for testing and playing and figuring it out and bringing that value back to your organization in whatever way you can at all levels, and to your clients for that matter as well.
Well said.
Well said. So we are embracing AI, and we hope everyone else out there is too. And we'll see you on the next Accounting Art podcast.
Thank you.
The Center for Accounting Transformation provides business professionals with a network for utilizing innovations that are ready for adoption, the training and resources necessary to apply those innovations, and an opportunity to engage the talent and community needed to further the pursuit of innovative accounting practices that drive responsible and mindful business performance. Find out more at our website, www.improvetheworld.net. And if you're interested in sharing your own transformation stories, please contact us there.